Supreme Court ruled that the president must turn them over.
The president's lawyer argued that the president was absolute. And of course, the Supreme Court said no, that he had to release the tapes. And, during that period when he was taking the position, since he was commander-in-chief of the Army and had all the power, and the court has no army, and the Congress has no army, when the court came down with its ruling, unanimous, by Chief Justice Berger, who Nixon had appointed, that he had to turn over the tapes, there was a pause in this country. What if the president refused? What do you do next?
The White House released 64 tapes. By that time, the public already knew that the tape of the first Oval Office conversation after the break-in had a mysterious 18.5-minute gap. But one of the newly released tapes made it clear that Nixon had ordered the CIA into the Watergate cover-up. And that became the smoking gun.
In favor, signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no.
Mr. Donahue.
Aye.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
In late July, the House Judiciary Committee began roll call votes on articles of impeachment. 3 of them stated that Nixon had violated his constitutional duty that the law be faithfully executed.
Mr. Moorhead.
No.
Mr. Marazzini.
No.
Mr. Rodino.
Aye.
The next step would be impeachment and a trial before the U.S. Senate. August 8, 1974.
I shall resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow. Vice President Ford will be sworn in as president at that hour in this office.
Nothing that is human is all that strange to any of us. But most of us can control the things in ourselves that we are not proud of. In the end, Nixon, who saw himself as a model of self-restraint and discipline, could not control his own demons.
Always give your best. Never get discouraged. Never be petty. Always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.
He realized the corrosive and self-destructive power of hate. And that's, unfortunately and tragically, what so much of the Nixon presidency was about. And that is what Watergate and the tapes exposed. And it is not just a loss of moral authority, it is the collapse of moral authority.
This was not an occasion for joy in the streets. And, this was an occasion for reflection and an occasion to reflect on all the aspects of this, including the human dimension of a man and his family. But the more important thing was the country and the principle of the law, and that no person in this country is above the law.
I mean, even when he did this at the end and he's on the helicopter, it was as though you want to say, Mr. President, don't you understand? This is not you're not going out in triumph here. You're going out in disgrace. It was just so strange.
John Michell resigned as campaign manager 2 weeks after the Watergate break-in. He served 19 months in jail. He died in 1988. Bob Haldeman was found guilty of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and lying under oath. He was in prison for 18 months and died in 1993. John Ehrlichman was also convicted of conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and lying under oath. He, too, spent 18 months in prison. He died in 1999. John Dean pled guilty to one count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. He served 4 months and 5 days in prison. Hugh Sloan resigned from the committee to re-elect the president less than a month after the Watergate break-in. It took him almost a year to find a new job. At the time he revealed the existence of the tapes, Alexander Butterfield was the head of the Federal Aviation Administration. President Gerald Ford fired him. Jeb Stuart Magruder pled guilty to obstructing justice. By his own accounting, he was in prison 7 months, 8 days, and 11 hours. Bud Krogh pled guilty to a charge of conspiracy against the rights of citizens. He served 4 months and 17 days. 2 months after his release, Krogh visited Richard Nixon.
I went to see him in 1974, right after he'd resigned, to tell him how sorry I was for my activity as part of the plumbers unit. Obviously, he paid an enormous price. We had a long conversation. He wanted to know about prison. What was jail like? Then he asked me a question. He said, should I plead guilty? Now, this was before he was pardoned by President Ford. And I asked him, I said, do you feel guilty? And he said, no, I don't. I said, well, you can't plead guilty. It's not a public relations act. You either feel that what you've done broke the law and you're pleading guilty because of that, or not. I don't think it can be done if you're not sincerely there. And I think the reason he didn't feel guilty was that he still had the mindset of a Cold Warrior. I think he had knowledge about what other presidents had done when they faced national security crises, and that what he did to try to protect his administration was not a violation of the law.
The central question at this point is simply put, what did the president know, and when did he know it?
It is a question that has gone unanswered for 3 decades. But Jeb Magruder, now a retired Presbyterian minister, has finally decided to tell what he claims to have witnessed. At this moment, we have only his word.
We went down together, and I had about 25 decision papers because Michell had been so sort of off track with these other issues. So we meet in the morning, and we go through the first 24, and they're typical campaign decisions about polling, advertising, whatever.
The day was Thursday, March 30th, 1972. Attorney General Michell, the head of the campaign to re-elect the president, met with his deputy, Magruder. Gordon Liddy's proposal to bug the telephone of the chairman of the National Democratic Party, Larry O'Brien, was the last item they discussed.
We didn't like the idea. It was going to the Watergate Democratic National Committee headquarters and bugging Larry O'Brien's phone. So Michell said, call Haldeman and find out, do we really have to, is this really important? So I call Haldeman, and he talks to me, and I say, we're not sure it's worth doing. And Haldeman said, yes, the president wants it done. He said, is John there? And I said, yes. And I give the phone to John, and Haldeman talks to him. And then the president comes on the line, talks to Michell. I could hear the president talking to him, and it was simply, John, we need to get the information on Larry O'Brien. The only way we can do that is through Liddy's plan, and you need to do that. Nixon was saying, we want Liddy to break into the Watergate. Michell gets off the phone and says to me, he says, well, Jeb, tell Maury Stans to give Liddy $250,000, and let's see what happens.